Smart comp. How smart is it really? Now, this is technically a sponsored video, but don't worry. I'll be pointing out the bad things too, the good, the bad, where it works, where it doesn't, what it's good for, what it's bad for, where I agree with it, where I don't. All these sorts of such things. I've been spending quite a long time testing it. Let's take a look. But first of all, how does this work? Well, it's a smart compressor. It suggests compression settings for you. Here we have an uncompressed vocal.
Now the bass kicks in.
A very dynamic vocal, a big difference between the highest bits and the lowest bits. So let's learn it. We'll click this Learn button.
Now the bass kicks in.
Look at that meter.
Now the bass kicks in.
It's learning it.
Now the bass kicks in.
Still learning.
Now the bass kicks in.
Ooh, there you go. It's suggesting compression settings. Normal compression on the side here, but also this spectral compression below.
Now the bass kicks in.
Spectral compression is actually multi-band compression. 2000 band multi-band compression.
Now the bass kicks in. Now the bass kicks in.
Look at that lovely visual feedback. These suggested settings are based on AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning stuff. As I'm sure you've seen, many different companies are marketing their products this way. And usually in plugins, when they suggest things, it just doesn't work. It demonstrably fails. I won't name any names, but one of them rhymes with Speisertaupe. But anyway, does it work in this case with Smart Comp? On some things it works great. Vocals, for example. And that's what we're looking at here. The top one's the original, and the bottom with Smart Comp applied. Look at the dynamic there. It's subtle. I've normalized them both, but look at the difference in dynamic range. The bottom one's fractionally more compressed.
Now the bass kicks in. Now the bass kicks in. Now the bass kicks in. Now the bass kicks in.
So by default, on vocals, it reduces dynamic range lovelily, nicely, smoothly, cleanly, transparently, perfectly every time. From my testing, it works in all vocal types, in every situation, every time, predictably, cleanly, without mistakes. And if you want it more compressed, if you want a smaller dynamic range, just apply it again. And that's what you're looking at here. The top one is the original, the middle one with Smart Comp applied once, and then the one below that, Smart Comp applied again. Literally just the default settings. Applied for a second time. Let's clean up the names. Boing! And again. Normalized, so it's a fair comparison. Look at the dynamic range reducing. So I apply it once and again. Dynamic range being the difference between the highest bits and the lower bits. Again, perfectly cleanly.
If you step into my shoes, maybe then, oh then you know. If you step into my shoes, maybe then, oh then you know. If you step into my shoes, maybe then, oh then you know.
All of this with zero twiddling about, just learning the vocal and using the suggested settings. Another good point, it's consistent. Here, for example, I did it once, and then I tried the same thing again to see if it gave the same result. And it did. The bottom one's phase inverted and they cancel out, proving they're the same. Again, unlike some other tools that suggest settings, which is good, that means there's at least some logic behind what it's doing. If it gives the same result a day later, that's a sign that things are happening properly. However, if you're being super picky, and sometimes I am super picky, it doesn't quite do it perfectly on absolutely everything in every single situation in existence ever. I've applied it here multiple times to a complete track. So this is the original, this is it applied once, this is it applied again, and this is it applied a third time. And as you can see from the file names, the second time I applied it, it slightly distorts in places. Super subtle, you won't hear it on almost any headphones, but it's there. If you listen on the right headphones and you know the track well enough and you have a critical enough ear, you can kind of hear some distortions. Super subtly, somewhere around here. And it's still very slight, but less slight if you do it a third time. Again, hearing some distortions around here. For reference, I should show you. That loop should be fine, it's close enough. It's in fact more noticeable around here. So let me show you on the bottom example where it's more noticeable. So look around, or listen for around here, some subtle distortions. In addition, it doesn't work where there's no correct or incorrect. Look at the kick drum, for example, here. It's not like that's better or worse than that shape. It's just different. And you could go from this to this with the compressor, or you could go from this to this with the compressor, and there's no right and wrong. It's quite simply just different. And so how can it suggest settings? I mean, think about it. So we've already made loops like this drum and bass loop. It doesn't really do anything, as you can see when I applied the drums preset. So let's turn this guy off, that fell apart completely. So this is the original, and this is with the drums preset. It slightly changed it, but again, not in a better or worse way, just different. Where it does do well, and where I think you should consider using it, is real life instruments, both the human voice and, say, a recording of a piano. Something like this. Oh, beautiful. Oh, magical vibes, feelings and vibes and emotions and feelings. So it works really well, really predictably for naturally dynamic instruments, such as a piano, the human voice, a real drum kit, a real guitar, something naturally dynamic. The top one is the original, and this is with the standard preset, this with the keys preset, and you can see how it's compressed it, reducing the dynamic range naturally, nicely. Gets it perfect, and of course, just like with vocals, you can do it over and over again, 3 or 4 times if need be, to compress it as much as you want. For those naturally dynamic sounds, it gets it perfect. It gets those attack and release times just absolutely nailed. And again, where it doesn't work is on the more electronic synthesized side of things, where there's no objective right or wrong. This top one is the original loop. This one, the standard preset. This, the kick preset. This, the drums preset. So, in fact, let me just play them first of all. In each case, it changes the loop, but not in any way that's better or worse. It's just different. That's because there's literally no correct and incorrect. It's not like this is better or worse than this, or that this is worse than that. Oftentimes, there's just no objective right and wrong. I mean, this one has more energy than this one, but it depends on the mix, because if you think about it, if there's lots happening in the mix, maybe some other instruments, actually, this one's better than this one. If there's other instruments happening around here, then this one has space for those instruments whilst retaining the punch of the kick, which wouldn't be the case for this one if there are instruments here. But if there weren't instruments there, this one would be better, because it's got more energy, but maybe not. It's got more energy because the tail's higher, but it's less punchy. By definition, the bigger the tail, the more energy it has, the more weight, the less punchy it can be, as the front bit's closer to the height of the sustain section. This is punchier than this. This has more energy than this. It's not like one's better than the other, they're just different. And so the suggested settings can't make that decision for you. So it's not a magic button that just fixes everything and gets it perfect. You still have to do some work yourself. And finally, the sidechain ducking option. So if you have 2 things competing, you can have one as the input and one being compressed. So in this case, the vocal and the synth are clashing. They're competing for each other's space. Let me show you that by itself first of all. Notice how when the synth comes in, the vocal gets lost a bit. So we can do some sidechain input vibes. So we have sidechain ducking turned on. We will route the input. So we're having the vocal coming in and the compressor on the synth. So the synth gets compressed when the vocal happens, but not just normal compression, this spectral compression. That's why this is special. So let's learn it from around here. That's a logical position. Learn. Oh, there's a lot of complicated visual feedback. It all makes sense. You either think it through or spend some time familiarizing yourself. It's showing you the input, the output, the gain reduction trace, the knee, all sorts of stuff. Either way, let's solo it out to show you, roughly speaking, what it's doing. So I'm soloing the synth, the thing that's being compressed. The vocal is triggering the compression on the synth. And let's do a loop-de-loop around this guy here. In fact, if I turn off spectral ducking, you can hear how the input's triggering the compression. So that'd be normal sidechain compression, just like having your hand on the volume control, the synth moving out of the way when the vocal happens. I mean, even that alone is useful. The suggested setting is getting it absolutely perfect. Imagine turning the synth down a bit every time the vocal happened. That would help the vocal stand out. And that fluttering up and down is that. But we have this spectral ducking, which is much more interesting. See the visual feedback down here? So it's subtle. What it's doing is turning down just the frequencies that are clashing with the vocal. How cool is that? So unlike normal sidechain compression, the synth sounds the same. It's magical stuff. In fact, let me show you a before and after. And I'm going to pick the most offending little section. And let's make it even more obvious so it's not as subtle. The sidechain ducking makes it so much easier to hear the vocal. Beautiful, marvelous magic. It's nice when stuff works. I use a lot of software that gets in all kinds of stuff, and usually it doesn't work. But this works, and that makes for a happy multiplier. A very happy multiplier. It's a happy multiplier multiplying the multiples. That wasn't even a word. That wasn't even a word at all, was it? Wasn't even a word at all. Wasn't even a word. Word. Bird is the word. That was an excellent episode of television.
Big up all ganja farmer that grow the best Asian. To heal up Jaja people. Dropping this here rhythm for all ganja farmer them.
Boom! Catch you on the flippity flip.